Hey there children, today we're going to be checking out a pet trainer no bark collar. It is a Pet856. This is purchased off Amazon and it's available most places. Bark collars can be kind of a controversial topic, I've noticed. A lot of people assume that they hurt and harm your dog. I don't necessarily believe that. I think that they are a tool and they have a place. And like any tool or anything really, if you do not use it right, yeah, you can cause harm with it. And that's from kitchen knives to cars, right? Anything can be used to harm somebody or something if you use it in that manner or use it other than it's intended to be used. So we'll get into that a bit here in a minute. But for now, let's just check out what's inside the box. So like I said, it's a pet trainer no bark collar. Inside you're gonna get your kind of a cheap collar, and this is the electronic portion. You also get some other things. You get a spare battery, which is nice because other bark collars I bought do not come with these, and it can be a pain to find them when you need them. So spare battery is nice. You get some extra silicone tips for the electrode part of it, and this is your tester. It allows you to both remove and adjust the electrodes on it, as well as test it on here to see if it's actually functioning, if your battery's working and the shock portion of it is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So you also get your destructions. Yeah, we'll get rid of this tower right now, and let's get right into it. So this is the shock collar part of it itself. Most of them come with an intensity adjustment on them, so in this case you can adjust it from 1 to 9. Then you have your mode, which switches between the different modes. On this one there is a beep, a vibrate, and then of course a static shock. And the static shock part is where most people lose it with these things, because they figure that it's harming their dog or whatever, or your dog, or animals in general. And that's not necessarily the case. So like as I said, this one has different modes. So there is your beep and vibrate together, there is just the beep, there is just the static shock, there is just the vibrate. And those are the three main ones, and then you have the combination, so you get beep vibrate or beep shock, those kind of things. And there's a reason for that. So when you first set this thing up, you'll take the battery portion off the back, pop in the battery because they don't come in them to start. Then once the battery is put in, you'll do your test, and that will involve taking the two electrodes, placing them on the lines with the indentations so you can actually put the probe in. The other side has lines, but there's no place to put the electrodes in. So you'll put it in, and then you'll have it on the setting you want with the static shock, and then you will make a loud noise, and you'll see the light on here light up. If you actually were to bark or whatever, this light would come on because it's sending in a static shock through the electrodes. The newer ones like these, the electrodes have silicone tips on them, which is really nice because the old ones didn't. They're just kind of a metal, and that part I didn't care for. So a shock collar is not meant to be worn all the time. This is not something that you put on your dog and you just leave it on all the time so that anytime he makes a noise, it shocks him or whatever. Most of them, unless you have a really stubborn animal, most of them you will use for short periods of time, and then you won't need it anymore, and then occasionally you might need to put it back on just as a reminder. So for myself, I like to use the beep and the static shock to begin with, and depending on the size of your animal, you can go from 1 to 9. Persistent barking stuff, you might want to go just right to the end, and I'll tell you why, is because it gets right off the bat, it gets their attention. And it's not an every time they make a noise, it's not every time a bang in the house happens, it's a series of them. So the first one, they might just get the beep on the collar, and that tells them, that sound gets in their head and they hear the beep, and then the next time they bark, it will give them a shock. And that is because they're giving them the warning, right? So it beeps first, and then they start to learn that if they go past that beep with the barking, then they get a shock. And I believe this one, you get about 3 barks before it actually gives them a reminder not to do that. And you could have it just set on the vibrate, and that kind of makes it go, huh, what is that? And it stops them from barking. But at first I found it as not as effective as the static shock. The static shock gets their attention right now. It is uncomfortable. It's not overly painful. I've tried it on myself. My son's even tried it on himself. It's uncomfortable, and yeah, it gets your attention, but it's not something that causes excruciating pain. Now, you use the static shock part for a bit, and after maybe a week, 5 days of that on, they get the idea, okay, if I bark more than 3 times, if I bark more than twice after that beep, I'm gonna get a reminder not to do that. So they start to learn. They'll give you a bark and maybe another lower bark, and that lets you know something's around, something's not right, somebody's coming in the house, whatever it is, you got a bear or something in the yard. Then from there, after that 5 days to a week, you take the mode and you turn it down to say beep and vibrate, or even just beep. And when that's on, the shock isn't there anymore, and then they still get that beep, but they don't know that the shock isn't there. So they stop after those 3 barks. And like I said, every now and then they might push it past that, and then you might have to put the collar back on with the static shock again, just to give them that little bit of reminder again, okay, don't go past that. But in my experience, it doesn't take them that long. After maybe 2 weeks to a month at most, your dog is not barking excessively anymore. It's not out on the porch yapping all the time or whatever. If something comes around, my personal dog, he gives a loud bark at first. He knows that he hears the beep or whatever. He knows if he goes past that, it's going to get uncomfortable. So then he does a series of low barks, just a woof woof kind of a thing, and you hear it, you know it's around, but nobody else does. The bark collars work best when combined with other positive reinforcement and verbal commands. So when the collar is on the dog, every time it's about to bark or it is barking or something, you give it a command, quiet, no bark, something like that. And it's every time that they do it. So in conjunction with the collar, they start to get used to that verbal command. And then when they stop barking, each time you make a big deal out of it, lots of pets, lots of praise, tell them how good they are, and reinforce that with another command like good no bark, good no bark, good no bark, and over again for one sitting. So if they stop barking once, it's oh, good no bark, good no bark, good no bark. Really animated, excited, praise them. I don't recommend treats. I think a dog who works for treats only works for treats. Most of the time they're unnecessary. They just want to please you. The dogs are amazing that way. So if you do that, and it's every single time, eventually when you take the collar off, the verbal commands and praise become all it's needed. And that works a lot faster than just trying to rely on the collar alone. And it strengthens it and makes the conditioning for that particular behavior stronger, so you don't have to worry about it as much. It's probably not going to come back as easily as if, say, you just used the collar by itself and didn't combine it with the other things. That works for everything with dogs. Like, ever take them for a walk, every time they pee, you say, good pee outside, good pee outside, good pee outside, and praise them. When you take them out in the yard or you're on a road trip and you're working with time constraints, you can take them out, say, pee outside, and boom, they pee outside. And then that works with everything. And then, like, number 2, number 1, whatever. And that can really help you out. He won't be spending half an hour looking around for a spot to go, smelling all the new smells, stuff like that. You can get back in the car, get on to your destination. So those kind of things in training work wonders, and I would suggest implementing those with other things that you already do, or with tools such as the training collar, the bark collar, any of those kind of things. Anything that you want to set a solid foundation of pattern of behavior for your dog. Repetition and praise are the 2 things that are going to get it done. And if you do those and you do them every time consistently, you can pretty much train your dog to anything. So those are the ways I like to use it. And for smaller dogs and stuff, you might get away with just the vibrate. And if you want to keep it on all the time as a constant reminder, you don't have to have the static shock on. You can just use the vibrate portion or just the beep portion. And then every once in a while you might need to remind them again, like I said. And that's with anything, right? Like, repetition creates the good habits. And if you keep on it all the time, then those habits are set in stone. Most of us don't want to do that all the time, so we tend to slack off a little bit, and then, you know, just like anybody or anything, those behaviors start to kind of get a little laxer and a little laxer and a little laxer, until the point where we've forgotten and we need a brush-up course. You know, there's brush-ups in the military, there's brush-ups for doctors, there's brush-ups for police, for just about everybody, anybody, right? So your dog is no different than that. And once you've done it and you have that behavior adjusted and that behavior set so that they know that's the right behavior, it is really not hard to keep them on that track. So like I said, a lot of people might find this not a great option, but if they understand how to use it properly and that you're not constantly using the bark, the static shock part of it, then it becomes a lot easier for people to get their heads around. And they realize, you know, I'm not hurting the animal and basically stopping it from this behavior that if I don't deal with it, somebody else is going to deal with it. And that will either be a bylaw officer or a mental case neighbor or something like that. Somebody or something is going to come along and put a stop to that behavior, and if it's not you, then it's probably not going to be as kind and gentle as you may wish it to be. So I look at these things as a tool to short term to save long term or potential injury to my animal. So I put these on. He doesn't even mind it. He knows the deal. He knows the drill with it. The beep goes off. That's it. You get some low rumbles. They figure out pretty quickly, they're smart, right? They figure out pretty quickly that what they can get away with within the parameters that you've set for them, and they still do their job and they still do it within your parameters. So yeah, that is the static shock collar in a nutshell. And if you have any questions or whatnot, let me know. And as always, be safe out there and, you know, treat your pets well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.